Back in the early 1980s, I used to live in Okinawa, Japan. My father thought that travelling the world would be a valuable endeavour, helping my brother and I to mature into more rounded men, and indeed, I believe that it did. Being a military man, I'm grateful for the experience and cultural enrichment that my time in the military afforded me, even the not so comfortable ones. My father decided to move us into a small Japanese neighbourhood near the base, so we could have a fully immersive experience while living in Japan. We resided in a small house situated at the summit of an enormous hill in a cul-de-sac that, I kid you not, overlooked a section of a large zoo on one side and a large cemetery on the other. Our house was situated about a mile uphill from the monkey habitats. Between us and those habitats was nothing but a dense jungle, reminiscent of one from an Indiana Jones movie. I would ignore the local warnings about dangerous snakes and old rusted, untripped mines from World War II as I stomped through the restricted areas of the neighbourhood with the other kids. Our family was the only one from America living on the cul-de-sac. We were completely surrounded by Japanese families, and it was an amazing experience. The children adored us, and even though we couldn't communicate through language too effectively, we understood each other well enough, for the most part. An older couple with a beautiful garden surrounding their home sat across from us. The older woman, who insisted we call her Mama-san, had us assist her with the garden whenever she could tempt us over with the glasses of green tea and chocolate or banana cookies. We were enamoured with her. She was very hospitable and kind, as was the case with everyone else, actually. It was a truly welcoming community. The main downside to Mama-san's house, however, was that it had a clear view of the cemetery, and it was a cemetery very different from any other I'd seen. Since Okinawa is an island, burials don't happen too frequently. Instead of digging graves below ground, crypts are built above it. Many of the crypts were constructed into the inclines of the hills that comprised the island. The crypts were immense, constructed of massive arcs of lustrous stone, set atop a giant stone square with a square opening cut into the centre of it for coffins to be placed inside. There were polished stone insets just inside the square, leaving a shelf-like structure on the outside where tributes could be made to deceased loved ones. Different tributes included yen, food, flowers and incense. Mama-san's house was situated in a valley with another hill on the opposite side. The valley and the hills were enveloped with crypts and spider webs. Various stone step pathways ran through the crypts that were aged and poorly maintained. The structures were quite something. On one particular evening, Mama-san invited me to come visit her, all on my own. Only I, as the older brother, was privy to what she wanted to show me. I was curious and proud, so I accepted her invitation. She led me to the rear of the garden and seated me on a sturdy wooden bench that was engraved with illustrations of fishermen and swordsmen. She said that she had a story to share with me. Mama-san then left for several moments and soon came back with a tray of steaming green tea and candied rice cakes. She smiled and remarked on the vibrant hues of the evening sky as the sun began to set. Mama-san mentioned that she had seen me, my brother and some other children playing a game where we took turns following a path down through the cemetery. The path from the area around our home to the cemetery consisted of hundreds of steps, many of them broken or cracked. It went in and out of bushes and was very steep. The true test was how long we could last walking through the crypts at night, and would be quite dangerous for the likes of anyone to try. Understandably, Mama-san felt that she needed to explain why that was not a good idea. A long time ago, during the war, Americans were considered to be demons, she began. Monsters that would take the lives of innocent civilians for no reason other than bloodlust. It was a fear manufactured by wartime propaganda as a means to galvanise young men and farmers to join the military and to give their lives for the country. However, many people didn't. Many fled. Feeling trapped, hundreds of Japanese civilians in the community chose to hurl themselves off a cliff's side rather than endure the horrors of their perceived enemy. I was petrified when I heard this. I was completely unaware that such a thing had occurred. I was so devastated and overwhelmed with sorrow that I began to cry. The sun slowly disappeared below the horizon, the sky turning a deep orange and red in its wake. Mama-san took my hand in hers and said not to worry, that what happened was in the past, that we must always remember it so that we never repeat the same mistakes. She continued her story. One young woman had carried out the sacrifice along with her 2 children, but despite the fall, had survived. She was in a state of unconsciousness for many months, and when she awoke, the horrifying realization that her children were no longer with her, it quickly possessed her. They had been buried in the cemetery below, amongst many others in an unmarked crypt. The woman would wander the cemetery day and night, searching and suffering in tears and torment with her unbearable loss. She never found her children, and in despair threw herself into the ocean in the hope of being reunited with them. It was said that the act of ending her own life condemned her to purgatory, and she would be forever tormented by her own anguish. As the sun set, the cemetery was engulfed in darkness, and the main path, lined with dim lights, faintly illuminated the smaller areas. Mama-san continued. She still roams the cemetery, she said, searching for her children. The sound of her crying can often be heard. She pointed downward with her finger. I didn't want to look, but something compelled me to. In the darkness, at the back of the cemetery, stood a white figure. It moved slowly and shakily with a bright shimmer. The figure swayed back and forth, as if gliding amongst the crypts, and then I started to hear it, a faint, eerie wailing. However, the low moans and whimpers soon began to grow louder as the figure moved closer. I was petrified. I felt an overwhelming urge to run, but Mama-san nestled my hand and whispered an assurance that she would not make her way up here, that we were safely far removed, but that venturing down there in the dark at any time would be ill-advised. She told me that many people don't know her story and call her the White Witch, which is known to provoke her, that it is best to keep a distance and to simply pray for her. Mama-san said the mother often wanders the area, hoping to one day find her children and end her suffering. As one would expect, I never again set foot in that cemetery again, not even once. I never returned to sit with Mama-san again either. It was all too much for me. I have since, however, taken a trip to Suicide Hill, as it was known, now more respectfully called Peace Prayer Park. I wept continuously while I was there. I offered prayers for all the lost souls and for forgiveness. We received such a warm welcome from the Japanese people we spoke to, who shared stories with us. I didn't feel like I deserved it, and my adoration for the country and its people is enormous. I'll always remember my time spent there. I would like to return there to see if she still remains, roaming amongst the crypts in search of her children.